I would like to, first of all, welcome you here and thanks the NDC partnership of which we are members to give us this space to present our work and also some really important discussion about like smart financing and how we can leapfrog like technologies into Africa. I am Carla Della Maggiora, the Deputy Director of the Swiss Foundation BASE. We specialize in the development of innovative business models to encourage the flow of funding to climate solutions. And in this occasion, we've been like receiving the support of an initiative called Integrate to Zero. And you're going to understand what do we mean by that. And having said that, I would like to sort of like set the scene a little bit and tell you about like, maybe many of you know about the ESCO model, Energy Service Companies model. And the whole idea of that is how you can use the delta, the efficiency gain from that saving to at the end finance the capex, the capital expenditure, and of course pay to that group, that person, that company developing and financing the investment. So at the end, the actual beneficiary is not paying for a capex. So in terms of the development of the ESCO model, this has really like grown to a massive scale. Like it's calculated $29 billion around the world, but it's very focused on the developed world. I'd say Europe, US, and China. That like it's the main, like it's the only, I would say maybe in the developing countries. But then the important thing that we have to account now is how like money, especially private resources, are being pledged to sort out like the climate crisis. So there's clearly going to be like a flow of funds, and we want to set the scene so that at the end, how can we bring those resources to Africa in this case, to developing countries, to accelerate the process of like moving from centralized energy systems to decentralized energy systems. So having said that, like the Integrate to Zero, what they want to do now is basically drive philanthropic funds to do this exactly, to scale up the ESCO model, but in the Africa context in this case. And for that, we need to start thinking about smart financing. How do we make this thing viable? How do we start de-risking this kind of investments? And for that, I would like to invite Aurélien Pillet. Aurélien is a senior climate finance specialist and a team lead at BASE. And he's going to present us like part of the work we've been doing in Africa on this aspect. Please, Aurélien.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the noise.
Sorry, Aurélien. Sorry, my mistake. I need to show. I'm gonna show like first of all like the video from Dan Hansaguiraker, who's the like executive manager of Integrate to Zero. Sorry for that mishap on my side. Because he's gonna set the scene of the whole talk, and unfortunately he couldn't be with us here. So, but we're gonna hear like his really inspiring words in this video, and then I'll give you the word.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, hope you're having a constructive time at COP27, and thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to make this little contribution to the overall flow of discussions. This COP's been touted very much as a finance COP and also as an implementation COP, and they're both obviously critically important. On the finance front, I hope that the discussions can move to levels of greater detail and technicality and avoid sort of high-level blunt requests for finance without being sufficiently clear about what and how to spend that money, which is partly what this discussion today is about, in focusing on the role of philanthropy and the role of finance more generally in enabling the scale-up of integrated energy systems. And that's where you really start to get into implementation and into the details of actually how is money used and how does it flow into contracts and what types of terms and conditions really work. And that's why I'm super excited, as per usual, to work with excellent colleagues at BASE who have done this many times over in many different parts of the world in different guises. So thank you to Team Base for organising this discussion, and very excited about our partnership on Integrate to Zero. A few words about the role of philanthropy, our contribution in this overall ecosystem of effort, which involves multiple different actors. I think that there's a role for greater risk-taking in the philanthropic world than, for example, in the world of bilateral flows of aid, and probably in the world of business as well, particularly where accountability to shareholders is a key pressure. I think there's greater flexibility in the world of philanthropy to take some of these risks. I think there's also an opportunity to really try and widen the opportunity spectrum from just those industrialized high-tech countries and environments to the countries that are often missing out on technology. And I know that the UNFCCC found agreement on technology transfer many years ago, but it's a pledge that is not yet fulfilled to the extent that it needs to be. And I think philanthropy is playing a role, can play an even greater role in helping to ensure more equitable access to these technological solutions that are so critical for the clean energy future that lies ahead. I think another role for philanthropy is to help forge collaborative efforts for financing, because of the greater freedom, if you like, that philanthropy can have in terms of, unlike, for example, a business, there are I say less, maybe no, there shouldn't be any competitive barriers that prevent foundations from collaborating with multiple actors in the same way that some businesses face those barriers. And then from governmental perspectives, of course, there are challenges there in national interests can prevent certain relationships from flourishing, whereas philanthropy is less bounded by these kind of restrictions. And I think therefore there's an opportunity for philanthropic funding to play a role, whether that's through sort of blended finance or other kind of financial mechanisms. So there's sort of three reflections that I have: slightly higher risk taking, a desire and a need, I think, to help ensure more equitable access to financing and clean technology in our efforts to tackle climate change, and then also an ability to collaborate across multiple different actors. So I very much look forward to hearing the outcome of the discussions today and to the work that we're engaged in with BASE and other partners going forward. We really are trying to get into implementation. We really are trying to understand what kind of contracts exist out there across Africa. Who's able to sign what? Is that attractive to customers? What kind of business models sit behind that? In particular, the extent that the ESCO model has been emerging as a solution for Africa more generally. I know a few countries, including in particular Morocco, have set up a super ESCO that's doing some great work, and others are Kenya as well. Kenya Power have set up a super ESCO, but these efforts are very nascent compared to the size of the ESCO industry globally, which I think is now valued around $29 billion. So there's a huge opportunity there to replicate the successes that have happened in the ESCO industry, particularly in China and the US and elsewhere. So I hope that this conversation can shine a light on that, and that all of this can feed into a constructive COP that really does deliver on the very urgent implementation needs that we're all trying to ensure we live up to. So thank you once again for the invitation. Have a wonderful discussion today, and look forward to catching up with all of you in the near future. Bye-bye.
So now we go back, and I'm gonna reintroduce Aurelian. And I would like, before you start, Aurelian, just to clarify something. When I described the ESCO model at the beginning, I focused on the energy efficiency element of it. That's how it was known. But we really can apply the same principle in terms of any saving, let's say, to like the production of renewables. Has been done with the power purchase agreements, and the whole idea is that by moving from decentralized to decentralized energy systems, we're going to be able to plug everything. So we're talking about e-mobility, your car, your motorcycles, air conditionings, etc. So it's going beyond just the efficiency. We're really bringing electrifying and using the grid as like the connector maybe. So in this case, like you're going to see some figures there. I'm going to let Aurelian go, but you can clearly see at least two kinds of technologies. We're talking about renewable solar panels, and we're talking some kind of e-mobility. So now, please go ahead, Aurelian.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carla. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today to present you the project Smart Financing for Integrating Renewables and E-Mobility in Africa, and some of the results of the study that we have conducted in a few sub-Saharan African countries, targeting the ESCO market. And when I mean ESCO, when I say ESCO, I mean energy service providers in a broader sense, targeting all kind of energy solutions. First of all, I will present you the result, and this will lead us also to a discussion on potential smart financing. I would like just to acknowledge the collaboration with Integrate to Zero, which is an initiative supported by the Climate Emergency Collaboration Group, and of course with BASE Foundation, which is a Swiss not-for-profit, which is specialized in developing financing mechanism and business models. There we go. So first of all, the objective of the research, we wanted to understand the energy service company markets, suppliers and contract types, and use this to recommend how philanthropic funding can support the scale-up of those integrated energy solutions. So first of all, through the study, we have been able to identify a few key barriers in that market. We are talking about stakeholder market disarticulation. Stakeholders have usually very interesting and innovative energy solutions, but they don't collaborate enough. They don't integrate the business modeling enough to really generate those interesting economic opportunities. There is an untapped sustainable energy profitable market. We have seen those technologies in all the markets that we have identified, and we think that the potential is enormous. Very often, the higher upfront cost, of course, in energy solutions, but also energy efficiency solutions, it's a true barrier for the end consumers. Also, the lack of proper regulation in the markets when it comes to VAT exemption, when it comes to net metering, all kind of regulation. We have seen that the framework is not there yet in a few countries. Local financing sources prioritize elsewhere. So we have not been able to leverage enough the private financing and the local financing. And as you all know, if you want to achieve the climate targets, most of the financing will have to be coming from local sources and from the private sector. Also, lack of knowledge on different financial mechanisms, lack of integration, again, on those different business models from different energy service providers, and a high perceived risk in a market from the different stakeholders. So it's very important to try to find a way to integrate better the different market players to achieve those opportunities. For the research boundaries, just to set the boundaries, so we were really looking on-site, on-road, on-grid energy technologies. That includes solar PV on one hand, that includes e-mobility, and specifically 2-, 3-wheelers, e-wheelers. But this could also apply, this piece of work could also apply of all kind of electricity consuming solution, energy solution, and find a way to better integrate them. it's a customer-driven business models. So we are really looking into those models that are targeting the customers, but with the perspective of the energy service providers. I will talk more on that later. We've been focusing on 6 countries in Africa, as you can see, Morocco among them, Rwanda, South Africa, and we also have Ghana, of course, and Nigeria. For the boundary, also the policy framework and the market conditions were analyzed. So we have been benchmarking the different countries on a set of conditions and factors, and we have conducted a cost-benefit analysis, looking, basically comparing the traditional fossil fuel-based solutions and traditional solutions with the the innovative energy technologies, such as the three-wheelers, two-wheelers, but also the solar PV system compared to, on-grid electricity in the case of the three-wheelers, if the energy source was the grid. And in the case of the end technologies, we have been comparing the e-mobility solutions with ICE type of vehicles and solutions. So having said that, when it comes to the mapping of the energy service providers, which was really the starting point of this research, the work has led us to estimate, it's an estimate, that there have been quite a few energy service providers in those 6 key markets. So as you can see, in Nigeria, we have 9 that has been identified as providing those energy services beyond energy efficiency, while in Ghana, only 3 have been estimated and identified. But we really try to analyze also the market enabling environment and the parameters in those 6 countries, and we did a bit of a benchmarking, ranking the countries in 2 type of categories: the ranking on renewable energy and the ranking on e-mobility. And as you can see, those 6 countries varies quite much, because the local context is extremely important and has a huge implication on the financing opportunities. So as you can see, Ghana is very high on those 2 factors, while we have a bit more challenging context in Nigeria. Of course, key factors of that analysis are the electricity tariff, the gasoline tariffs, which will, of course, drive the economics of those solutions and the cost-benefit analysis. Next slide, sorry. So next, exploring the integrated technology solutions. So I think this is really the exciting part of the study, because we are not looking at those solutions as silos or separate technologies, but we want to look into the integration and the economic rationale of integrated better those solutions. So for the study, for the analysis, we have been focusing on electric 2- and 3-wheelers, plus solar PV for the charging, swapping batteries. So what we have been doing is we have been basically looking into 2 batches of 15 2- 3-wheelers type of vehicles, plus solar PV generation for those swapping stations, those recharging stations. And what is interesting is that the swapping discharge batteries are basically compared to the traditional sort of charging, the fossil fuels-based or grid-based sort of charging in the study. And also we have seen that the recharging cost at a station is cheaper than at home. It's a very important factor if you want to make it viable. And for the consideration, it's important to consider that digitalization and data integration can really enable the financing. So we are talking about technology solutions such as geolocation, battery charging control, risk mitigation can really help drive the integration of the different solutions and achieve those important conditions. Also, an aggregated portfolio allows access to innovative and competitive financial structures, and economy of scale, reduce costs. So those are important considerations. So it's important to have financing mechanism and business models to achieve that integration. This is an example of the battery swapping station, just to give you a bit of an illustration of how it looks. But for the economic analysis, so looking into that comparison between traditional type of financing, no financing with smart financing, and traditional solution, energy solution with those sustainable solutions, we have seen that the payback is very, very interesting, but varies, of course, quite a lot. So in the case of electric three-wheelers, we have seen that the paybacks are low for both options, but with financing we can go even further. As for solar PV, the payback of solar PV with financing is 10.2. So here we're really looking at silos. We are not integrating yet. As for electric three-wheelers plus PV, then you can see that the payback is extremely interesting for the energy service providers. And by the way, here you're really looking at the cost-benefit analysis with the perspective of the energy providers, not the end users. For further cost-benefit analysis on a country basis, you can see that it varies quite a lot when it comes to the total cost of ownership of those solutions. So again, 30 vehicles on one hand, we're looking into that, plus the batteries and the solar cells that are needed for the recharging stations. And as you can see, the costs vary quite much from one country to another, based on those parameters that I mentioned, such as the electricity price, such as the policy framework, the fuel price, and so on and so on. Very interesting comments that we received throughout the interview process from the stakeholders, from those energy service providers. First, e-motorcycles are more economical than ICE, with 40% savings compared to ICE over the OPEX. So that's a no-brainer. The life cycle cost of e-motorcycles are definitely much better than the ICE systems. The new business models need a well-designed strategy, so this is something we will be discussing, ways to bring in the smart financing and to mitigate those risks so that we can integrate better those solutions. The problem of the affordability in the market, not only for the energy service providers who have quite a lot of difficulties to access the financing from the traditional banks, for instance, who don't really understand those innovative business models and that integration, but also on the end consumer perspective, right? Because for them, it's all about higher upfront cost of acquiring those equipment. So you have to come up with the right business model to overcome that very significant barrier. The growing strain on smaller local companies with limited capacity to absorb transaction costs. Again, a difficulty to access the capitals, to access the financing because of their very new business solution that is, again, not so well understood from the commercial traditional financing players. As for solar PV, need to creating awareness among SMEs to be open to adopting new solutions and understanding the importance of sustainability is still quite a challenge. And again, many banks do not understand the new business model also for solar PV, which is quite surprising. So then this leads us to the importance of philanthropy to mobilize the capital. As you can see, there is a clear economic rationale for better integration of those energy solutions. And we believe there is a high potential for financing the business development of those solutions and to help integrate. We have been looking into a few instruments, a few financing options. And as you can see, first we look at first loss credit guarantees. We have been also looking at philanthropic concessional loans, philanthropic project finance, philanthropic equity investment to ESCOs, dedicated credit leasing product from banks, And we believe that all those options have a huge potential to leverage the financing from the private sector, but some have more potential than others. So we would like really to take that as a basis for discussion and for further development to come up with the right structuring moving forward and right de-risking, capitalizing on the availability of philanthropic money to enable those investment in those integrated solutions. And of course, we believe that technical assistance to the financial institution to build a dedicated revolving products could also be a solution, and with huge leverage potential, as you can see for the two last options. So those are options that are on the table for discussion that we believe have huge potential. And I think I would like to thank you all and open the discussion with the panel members. Thank you.
So thank you, Aurélien. And before inviting our guests to the panel, I would like to maybe highlight a couple of things that I saw here. First of all, the fact that there are not many ESCOs currently working in Africa, so that means really creating that market, the awareness that is required, and of course setting all the conditions like regulation and market conditions for it to work. Then in particular to the study is how at the end you see local conditions, again set by regulation, let's call it feed-in tariffs, price of electricity, or name it, at the end really sets whether one option is financially viable or not, and also it starts giving you guidance, so maybe what kind of business models we can develop. As you mentioned, the role of philanthropy, it's maybe a pot of money there, but it's limited and you have to be very clever how you allocate it. And what's clear of what you said is that business model development requires that philanthropy resource as well. And I would say it's a very clever way in terms of identifying which are these business models that are going to work best. There's not one solution that fits everything. You cannot copy paste here. So identifying which are the most effective is key in this. So having said that, I would like to bring you back, Aurélien, to the stage to join the panel. And then I'm also going to bring here, I would like to invite Rashid Enasiri. Rashid is an energy transition advisor and is advising, supporting the Morocco's Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development in implementing the breakthrough agenda. Then you can talk more a little bit about all your expertise, but something I really want to highlight from you, that you are really a youth representative, a very young person, very active in the youth world as well. So for us, it's extremely valuable to have that vision. Then, last but not least, I would like to have here Vivek Sen. He's an associate director with the Climate Policy Initiative in the Delhi office. He leads and is closely involved with the India chapter of the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance, basically identifying really financial, climate finance solutions that can really drive investment. And having you here, it's a pleasure because you all have experience in different parts of the world and in different kinds of sectors, from the public sector, philanthropy sector, private sector. So I think you can bring a lot of know-how, and I'm glad to share this this panel with you. So in this case, I want to go back to the video of Dan, yeah, and I want to try to frame it within the philanthropic role of what can we do with that. And basically Dan had his key message that at the end in terms of philanthropy is that he sees three roles that they can have. One has to do with the risk taking. Clearly they can play a role in de-risking. Now how we do that, there are many options, and you put some of those there, Aurélien. Then the whole idea of technology transfer. They can really support, and in this case we said, what about if we use this funding to leapfrog technology, in this case in distributed energy systems in Africa. And last but not least is the idea that they have I would say the flexibility and freedom to generate collaboration. And again, this is not one actor solving the problem, this is a matter of actors, stakeholders coming together to solve the problem. So, having said that, taking into account these three roles, first of all, I would like to ask you, maybe we're going to start in this order, which are the key roles do you see philanthropic use of funding? And also, I would like to, based on your expertise, experience, if you can give us an example of either any of the ones mentioned by Dan or the ones that you mentioned, if you can give us an example of philanthropic use of resources that can really have generated results.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carla, for the question. Nice to be here with base colleagues who are doing a tremendous work when it comes to pushing forward and supporting Morocco's energy efficiency market by providing some targeted support to our super ESCO in Morocco, which has been, it's still nascent when it comes to the market, but the potential is there, and the work that has been that is going now with super ESCO is very interesting. When it comes to the landscape of philanthropies funding worldwide, I think despite of the climate change impact on their work, philanthropies have historically allocated small amount of their funding to the climate. Let's say the example of 2020. United States-based grant makers, for example, disbursed almost 64 billions. And out of that, only 320 million has been dedicated to climate. So we can say that additional funding has been dedicated to some related environment issues, being it air pollution, land use, water resources. But when we see the weight of the crisis, I think is not that much. But here in Sharm el-Sheikh, I think last week the philanthropies, as it was in Glasgow, stepped up, and we have seen some good announcements. Being it, for example, the 500 million that has been announced by a coalition of philanthropies to support a just and equitable just energy transition in developing countries. We have seen the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet joined with philanthropy funding the Just Energy Transition partnerships, like the one in South Africa, now in Indonesia, etc. But as you said, let me mention some specific examples from Morocco. I think through my engagement, especially through the Energy Transition Council, the role of philanthropy has been very instrumental in the last 3 years in supporting Morocco's energy transition. And this is partially, as I mentioned, to the multilateral platforms of multilateral collaboration that have been announced at COP26, such as the Energy Transition Council. And this, let's say, allowed the Moroccan stakeholders to discover new forms of straightforward technical assistance. If I may say, as I mentioned, the support that is being provided by the Climate Emergency Collaboration Group and implemented by BASE on energy saving insurance model, which will certainly unblock and also give more confidence to customers and industrials to invest in energy efficiency. Through philanthropy as well, we are supporting the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency to elaborate a net zero roadmap of the agro-industrial sector by 2050. This is a sector which will face in the coming 3 years some trade challenges vis-a-vis the European Union, especially if the EU carbon tax will come into application by 2025. The breakthrough agenda, you just mentioned it, the philanthropy has supported Morocco's international positioning as a voice of developing countries to define what will be the priority international actions in key emitting sector. So philanthropy supported Morocco's role as co-chair of the power breakthrough, the building breakthrough that has been announced this morning. Looking forward to Integrate to Zero, philanthropy is providing some philanthropy capex to implement a demonstration project on distributed energy systems. I just launched 2 weeks ago a request for proposals at the country level to implement a demonstration project in the agriculture and agro industry sector. So I think as we move ahead, I think philanthropic catalytic support will be key in assisting key efforts of the government and civil society organizations. And this will be, as it has been done in the last 2 years, in a flexible and de-risking tolerant funding to key priority areas in Morocco.
Okay. The same question is like giving your expertise. If you can give us an example.
So I'll give you an example of a very, very innovative as well as successful project which was launched with the support of philanthropic monies and which resulted in a leverage of 40x. And this was in terms of launching a bilateral US-India project preparation facility for advancing distributed rooftop solar. So the project was aimed at developing the ecosystem, aimed at capacitating the vendors and also informing the non-banking financial companies and the financial sector about the risks that are there in such projects. So the project preparation facility was launched with an initial capital of 11 million in India, and with that money it has been able to mobilize over $500 million. Apart from that, it has been able to actually commission more than 300 megawatts of distributed rooftop solar, and also in the process abate tons of CO2s. So the facility has been a large success. The role of philanthropic capital, I think, in this case was to reduce the risk. The risk related to the credit quality of small scale projects that usually you see in either mobility or in the distributed rooftops space. So picking up on projects that by themselves would not be able to identify and bring on investments, making them investment ready. That was the critical role that was played by philanthropic money. And this, we term it under a blanket called ecosystem development. But apart from that as well, apart from US ISEF, the project, the philanthropic money can also play a role of, say, reducing the technology risk or reducing the risk related to the small ticket financing by giving, and the portfolio level risk of such small scale projects by providing a first lot guarantee facility. So that in a way will mobilize more and more finance, more and more private finance into the sector. That allows the ecosystem to build slowly but steadily. So philanthropic monies, as always, is scarce but has a great role to play.
Thank you, Vivek. So Aurelian, again, if you can, like based on your expertise, if you can give us an example.
Absolutely, thank you very much. So I would like to give 2 clear examples of how philanthropic money has been used to enable the market. First in Ghana. So we are not talking specifically about solar systems, but philanthropic was able to create a risk mitigation facility and credit facility for end consumers, households, to enable them, to give them the opportunity to invest in energy efficient appliances. And it was really because of the philanthropic money that we were able to structure such a program that was lowering the risk perception for the local banks, the local financial institutions, and giving them enough comfort to invest themselves in those systems. So by setting up those credit facilities between the banks and some vendors of eligible energy efficiency appliances and equipment, and by coupling this with a clear risk mitigation mechanism to recover the repayments, in the case of Ghana through salary deduction, targeting salaried employees, we were able to move the local financial market and unlock that financing. And I think if this can work for energy efficient appliances, this can work for all type of energy solutions, because as I said earlier, we are not only looking into e-mobility, we are looking into all kind of on-site electric solutions that can be promoted through those arrangements. Second example that you already touched upon, but I think is also very relevant, is the example of Morocco. With the leadership of SCE and the support from CSTG, we have been able to put together the right framework to create a market for ESCOs in the field, again, of energy efficiency, but also including potentially investment in solar PV for the SMEs. And how to do that? Again, it's all about creating those opportunities and addressing the market barriers. And the philanthropic money has been able to help set up the framework, develop components, non-financial and financial components, namely a standardized contract that clarify the role of the ESCOs in the market and the role of the end consumer when it comes to investing in energy efficiency. Standardized contracts in the form of an energy performance contract, but also moving beyond that and creating new financial instruments. And it's only with the support from philanthropic money that we have been able to move the market, develop an insurance product to guarantee the energy savings. And by putting all together those pieces, you are really enabling the financing from the private sector. The banks there, they have availability of funds, but very often they don't know how to mobilize those funds. So if you can structure those de-risking mechanisms and those components that can lower the risk perception, thanks to philanthropic money, you can at the end leverage the financing. And that's really, I think, two key examples that have been myself experiences, and I think that can be replicated in many environments and contexts.
Perfect, thank you. So, like, from what you have shared with us, we really see like a lot of different roles. So, like, to philanthropic funding, we talked from like financing pilot, like providing capex. We talk about like covering technological risk. You mentioned like Vivek the impressive sort of like development through this preparation facility of like solar rooftops. So, and you, Aurelian, you share with us that how like basically having that financing to develop the business model. One thing is to have an idea, this is gonna work, like we say, we can promise something, but then you really need to make it operational on the ground, and that requires bringing all the stakeholders to play. Something that really struck me was this thing that you mentioned about how very little funding goes to climate change. And you did mention that there's a lot of funding going to other causes like clean air, etc. So, but when we think that like having a solution as like distributed energy systems, when we're talking about having renewables, having appliances connected there, like e-mobility, you're talking about like lots of other co-benefits. You're talking about like impacts on health. You're talking about impacts on clean air. So what do you think, what's your take in terms of, I feel that we can knock the doors of many philanthropies that are not necessarily focused on climate change. Maybe they are focused on other topics. So again, do you see an interest, like in the philanthropies that are helping you somehow? Are just the ones that really have the flag of climate change, or are they really bringing these other topics? Can we go to the ones that maybe they really are like focused on clean air and tell them, look guys, by doing this, you're really gonna help the market develop, and maybe our focus has been climate change, and this is but it's an entry point. So if you can have, and maybe again, base it on your experience or on what you have seen, and if you can share something about that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, philanthropies always look for co-benefits when it comes to deploying their monies. The simple fact is, philanthropic money is scarce. It's very rare as compared to the commercial capital or any other form of capital that you would see. So, when philanthropies design their strategic mandate, even if they are looking for investments into, say, mitigation activities, they would always look for what are the co-benefits that come out of it. It goes that way. They really don't desire, and in some cases, some of the philanthropies go to an extent wherein they will actually measure the co-benefits out of whatever investments they have made in a particular country. So if there is an investment in e-mobility solutions, the obvious benefit of that is cleaner air. And that way they will also monitor the reduction in air pollution in that region or that area. So philanthropies go in that manner, and that's their agenda or that's their mandate.
I don't know if anyone would like to compliment.
I think what I have seen from philanthropies are more aware, let's say, about the urgency of the climate crisis. And when we spoke with them, I think they are more looking for key areas that will immediately create change. They are also open to capitalize and build on what has been done, which is very important. And in the Moroccan case, when it comes to its energy transition, there is ongoing planning on how the philanthropy will play a key role in the next phase of Morocco's energy transition. Morocco started its energy transition since 2009. There are many mistakes that have been done. There are many good lessons that have been capitalized on. And now there is a whole ongoing reviewing of how the next phase will be implemented. And I think from what has been implemented in the past in terms of large-scale projects, as you mentioned earlier, I think Morocco's next phase is well aligned with what we are discussing here, and also what the philanthropy is looking forward, especially this decentralized mix, and this is what we are expecting in Morocco. And certainly the philanthropy will play an instrumental role in shaping the next phase of Morocco's energy transition.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, to complement on what has been just said, I think philanthropies also support innovation. That's something I've seen. And not all the players out there, multilateral development banks, other players, play that role, unfortunately. And philanthropies can really fill that gap, and they're supporting innovation. Also, I believe that they're going in country contexts that are more difficult than others, and that are maybe not the one attracting the most support from the usual suspects. And I think those are two key elements, because they can help bring at scale again in different contexts and economies those solutions that are needed for the countries and for the people. And I think that's really an important role.
I want to make an additional point, and in continuation to what my colleague said. So, and I like to cite an example here. The Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance is a direct result of philanthropic money being used in innovative financing. So what the lab does is produces innovative financing instruments that can be deployed in any area, in any geography, that will do two things. One, reduce the cost of capital, and two, increase the access of finance. Now, over a period of 8 years, the lab has been able to produce 55 instruments and mobilize more than $325 billion just by utilizing a small chunk of philanthropic money. I'll give you some examples of the solutions that they have provided in India when it comes to solar and mobility solutions. So there is a solar rooftop aggregation and facility that was launched in the year 2016. That was one of the results of the India Lab program. In 2017-18, we saw a couple of programs on mobility, wherein one was a battery swapping facility, which was meant for large-scale fleet operators. And secondly, there was a small converting the ICE rickshaw or three-wheeler into a battery-operated three-wheeler. So they were while they were addressing the financing risk as well, they were in the process also addressing the technological risk, right? So I totally agree with him. Philanthropic money does play a role in creating innovative financial solutions.
Excellent, thank you. So one question I would like to ask you again, and then I want to open it to see if there's something else from the audience. Otherwise, I have more questions for you. Is like, we are talking about integrating here, and that's really key. So far, we've seen maybe a lot of initiatives trying to do like solar or trying to do wind, any kind of renewable. On the other hand, some trying to do like cooling, some trying to do e-mobility, etc. Now we're really talking about like doing that together, this decentralizing, but integrating these little sort of like mini grids, let's say. So do you think that by integrating, do we favor the ESCO market? Are we boosting that ESCO market, or are we making it more challenging? Are there economies of skills that you can think of? What are like maybe pros and cons? And this is, again.
So I think integration would really help. It is not at all making the situation complex. That's my view. Ideally, what happens when you integrate the solutions to create an ecosystem, many of the barriers that individually in geographies have been left unanswered get solved, right? So for example, because there is a chance of replication and replication of efforts that have been successful in one geography and can be taken and replicated in other geography. For example, project preparation facilities are a huge success in India, and Africa is a perfect land wherein these can be replicated. So a lot of mini grid operators, a lot of distributed rooftop solar operators, even the government would benefit out of it. The thing is that there are few guidelines that have to be kept in mind, whether you want to involve or keep it strictly private, or make it public private, or want to make it a public project preparation facilities. Those are the things that can be decided based on the law of the land. So I don't think so the ESCO market will not benefit by integrating the solutions. It will definitely benefit.
Yeah, I think from a specific example in Morocco, what we need exactly now, there is a lot of talk about shifting to decentralized production. But what does it mean concretely? We still need some definition there. I think through Integrate to Zero, what we are going to do in the next month is to push and to influence the government to endorse the fact to elaborate a strategy on distributed energy systems, and also, in addition to that, to make sure that the distributed energy systems integration thinking is owned at all levels of society. Because the experience that I have seen so far when I launched that we published the request for proposal asking energy service companies to implement a distributed energy system in Morocco, I think this raised many questions because the way that electricity has been produced is in a traditional way, just put solar panels there without taking into account the benefits that e-mobility, heating, cooling can add to the system. Second, stable and clear regulatory frameworks which favor the distributed energy system, and also all this interactions between the EVs with the grid. You see some technical aspect needs to be clarified as part of the regulatory framework. Financing mechanisms backs to Aurelian point about, I think as you have seen in Morocco, there are a lot of financing mechanisms for the green economy, but they are not smart yet to take into account the integration aspect. So I think this is the main point I see from my perspective.
Thank you very much. Yes, no, absolutely. Also, when it comes to integration of those systems, I think the idea of connecting the different players in the market and connecting those technologies is very key. We have seen that also at Base, working on different development of financing mechanism and business models. At the end of the day, we end up being the interface among players that don't talk to each other, even though they have common interests in a certain type of investment, technologies, and so on. And that's really something crucial. You have to make sure that start talking the same language, and also by doing that, you can enable more technology integration. That's one point. The second point is on the opportunities. I believe that integration will come by itself if you can show the business opportunities to the different stakeholders. Again, you have the energy service providers. I think the economic analysis that we have been doing, the cost-benefit analysis, shows that there is a huge potential for them and a profit to be made, a fair profit to be made. But also for the end users, you have to make sure that the end users is benefiting from the integration of those energy solutions. They will be the main recipient of those technology at the end of the day. So if you can really show that very clearly, the market will just come naturally and the solution will be mobilized.
Thank you. So I would like we have time maybe for one quick question. If there's someone from the audience that would like to make a question. Otherwise, please state your name and the organization.
My name is Labadnya Prakash Jana. I'm from Commonwealth Secretariat. One quick question regarding leverage and catalytic, because in last few years we are seeing a lot of leverage. It means that how much capital coming from public sector and how much capital are able to mobilize from the private sector. But sometimes it sort of defeats the purpose of catalytic. For example, in the drug discovery stage, so capital is coming to the government or philanthropy to discover a drug. But at that point of time, there is no private capital. But if the drug becomes successful, you can bring an enormous capital. So that's the catalytic point of view. So is there a balance required? Because there is a lot of discussion going on leverage rather than catalytic in nature. I just wanted to some points from the panelists. Thank you.
I think a balance is needed. In the initial stages, the role of the philanthropic money or the catalytic finances to reduce certain specific risks, which it does, and over a period of time, that catalytic capital is able to pool in more and more capital to kind of further reduce the risk of the total facility. So I think a balance is needed in that regards.
Yeah, I think we are running short of time. Thank you for that, and thanks to the panelists. I would like to close, I don't know, maybe bringing together a couple of thoughts. First of all, that clearly philanthropy has a role, that they can have a role in general, of course, in the climate change agenda, but in particular in this whole effort to bring renewables and integrating them with electric based appliances or equipment that we said. That there's, of course, a policy element that is extremely important, but I would say I do see a very strong role and an advocate, and I'm trying not to be biased here, but the importance of the business model development side, because at the end of the day, first of all, the only way you can develop a business model is by understanding the local features, conditions, understanding what are the issues, which are the actors that play a role, which are the barriers and the risks they face. And only that you can make them really collaborate. I think it's extremely important, the idea that we need to align interest, because if we have an environment where at the end one is benefiting and the other one is losing, it's not going to work. And as it was mentioned, it's not just about those investing in the technologies, but also in the end users. So having those elements and developing these mechanisms at the end so you can make this alignment a reality, I think is key. Philanthropy resources are limited, we saw, but if we use it really wisely, they can be a game changer. And let's all keep working towards that. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for Integrate to Zero.